Now let's work on the two sashes that are sort of draping down the sides. So these pieces here. So we'll go to the sash texture set, which only has these on it. And you'll see the way that we laid these out is completely straight horizontally. So if you remember when we did the UVs, we had the option to unfold this and make the UVs very undistorted, but it made more sense to lay this out straight so that we can start to add things along this, knowing that this piece of cloth is really just a rectangle draped over this other piece. And so let's go ahead and start by bringing in a fill layer, and let's choose the base color. I'm going to make mine red. Let's go down to the metalness, and I'm going to dial this up to give it more of a satin look. And then we can play with the roughness a little bit. So I think something like that looks pretty good. Now I want to add some wrinkling along here, some kind of folds. And so to do that, I'm going to come down in procedurals to these stripes. And let's go ahead and I'm going to add these stripes to the bump. So let's go ahead and drag this over to height. All right. So it's obviously going the wrong direction right now. So let's come down under pattern. And we do have a shift. So let's go ahead and dial that shift all the way back. So now they're going completely from left to right. Let's increase the number of stripes that we have. We can change the width of those. Okay, we can also change the softness. But right now, they're really, really hard edged, which we don't want. So let's go ahead and add a filter. Come in here and add filter. Let's choose a blur. So we'll add a blur to this layer here. Let's take up the blur intensity till we get something like that. All right. Let's go ahead and we can play with again with the number of stripes. So we can choose how many we want. Change the width a little bit. Now let's say that the bump is a little bit too much. We can also add another filter. And this one we're going to choose a height adjustment. Okay, and this will allow us to actually adjust how deep that bump is. Okay, so we're adjusting how blurry it is to make it nice and smooth, and then we're adjusting how deep it is because it's driving the height, but it doesn't know how much to do that. And so we're going to be able to adjust that here. So we'll do something like that to give us some nice folds coming down. And then we can go back into the color and we can continue to adjust based on the folds that we now have. We can continue to adjust how metallic it is. You can see the difference when we make it more metallic. It gives it that more satin look. We could change the roughness values to get the exact look that we want. Now we can also start to add a little bit of occlusion kind of a look in here. We could do that with simply a new paint layer. Let's go ahead and choose black. And I'm going to go ahead and reset my brush. Let's choose kind of a basic soft brush. I'm going to choose black. And that's the only thing I'm going to paint is color. I'll turn everything else off. Let's turn on symmetry. I'm just going to paint across here. Let's kind of paint across the back there. Let's go ahead and add a blur. So we'll add a blur, increase that blur amount. So we get something like that. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and take this opacity down a little bit so that we get much lower opacity there. All right, so it gives us a little bit more kind of darkness there. And we can come back in and still paint through this. Keep in mind, you're not going to see it reflected because it's taking into account the blur. So, if you start to paint further down, you'll see it. So I think something like that looks pretty good. You can experiment again with the stripes. Everything is completely changeable at this point. You can go in and adjust the height. You can adjust the number of stripes. You can adjust the softness of the stripes. Everything is set up to where you can change it. So you're not just painting in pixels. It's a very flexible workflow. Again, like you've seen with all of these other lessons that we've gone through. Go ahead and turn on the gold pieces. Next, let's go ahead and take kind of the basic skin that we created down here. Go ahead and apply that to the head and then begin to finish out some of the different areas of the head with some different kinds of materials. So we've got kind of the horns and teeth and things like that. So let's go ahead and add the kind of basic skin texture that we have onto the head, and then we'll modify that and just kind of add to that to get the texture. Now let's begin to add some texture to the head. And we already have a basic skin texture that we've used on the body. So let's go to the body, and I'm just going to package this out so that we can use this as a base for the head. So we'll right click on this and choose Create Smart Material. And then let's come down and find it here. So Skin Base. Let's go to our head, and let's just add the skin base to the top here, and we can get rid of that bottom layer. Now, if we jump into the folder, you can see that there are a couple of masks here that right now are black. So I'm just going to go in and add our shells here, and then we'll do the same thing here. You could also, in some of those cases, get rid of the mask, but I do want to have the mask there because I want to, in some of these cases, kind of blend some of this out a little bit more in some of these areas. All right, so now we've got the color coming through. We've got the main bumpiness coming through. We've got the scales coming through. And then the curvature map, we have that as a layer, and you can see it's automatically switched to use a different curve map. So it's not like we exported the layer, the curve layer that was the curve of the body, and it came through here. It's a smart material, so it knows, okay, it knows to use the correct curvature map, basically. All right, so it switched over to the head. So now what we can do is start to blend some of these details out a little bit more. So in this case, maybe we want the scales to be a little bit less intense. We'll go to Filter. I'm just going to choose a height adjust, and maybe just take those down just a little bit. Okay, maybe something like that. Now we can start to blend out some of these details. So for instance, on the scales, let's say, we can come into the mask. I'm going to turn on, make sure that symmetry is turned on. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of mask out some of these areas a little bit more. And so just using a black color, and I want flow to be determined by the pen pressure. Let's take our size down a little bit. And just in here, right around the eye, on the eyelid, I want to kind of take that scaling out a little bit. So we'll kind of bring this out. Okay, and you can see how it's affecting the bump as well, the overall bump. We can blur that out a little bit. Okay, also on these harder edged areas, or these kind of bonier areas, I'm going to blend it out up here. Kind of back into the head. Okay, kind of something like that. Let's also kind of blend it out up here in the front. I'm going to turn off the horns for now, so we can kind of see inside of here. Okay, something like that. Also, we may want to up here kind of remove some of this from the top, just because this is going to be a little bit more of like a hard surfacey kind of a look. And so we don't necessarily want the skin kind of scaly kind of texture there. So I'm just going to come to like the rim out here and kind of blend that back out. Also inside of the ear, I'm actually going to leave that for now, I think. Something like that. We can also go ahead and then on the actual mask, add a filter. And let's choose a blur on this one. So that'll just kind of blur that filter out a little bit. That transition. Another thing that I want to do is add some color to the ears. So let's add a new layer, and I'm going to add this outside of the skin base. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to add a new, let's add a paint layer. All right. I want to go to brushes. I don't want to get kind of a rough, kind of dirty brush. Maybe Dirt 3 would be good. The dots would be good as well. Go ahead and let's try the Dirt one first, maybe Dirt 1. and then go back to the dots here in a second. So I'm going to take the size down. And in here, I want to choose to paint the color and the roughness. The color, I'll make kind of a red color. And maybe into a little bit of the purple. All right, and the roughness, I'll take this roughness down quite a bit. So now I'm just going to come in and start to paint this. Let's get a kind of a smaller brush size. I'm just going to come down and start to blend it into the head here. And the key with making a lot of these organic things look more realistic is layering and changing your colors and layering a bunch of those together. So let's go ahead and modify this red, make it a little bit more in the red and a little bit darker. Go back over it. I'm going to go all the way up to the edge there, kind of blending down into the head. Now let's go a bit lighter. And just kind of not try to cover it all, but just kind of real patchy, kind of over the top of it. Let's now jump down to maybe the dots brush right here. Let's get kind of a darker red, the smaller size. And this will give us a little bit more of a splotchier look. We can kind of alternate dark and light, and then even alternate the hues as well. And mine is kind of a reddish pink color. Yours doesn't have to be that. It can be whatever color you want. Just trying to add a little variation to the head in terms of the color, but then also the shininess of it. So maybe add a little bit of purple to it, the mix. Just kind of blending it down into the surface. Let's get a little bit lighter. Again, just with a pretty light touch. I'm not adding any kind of bump or anything right now, just adding this kind of color variation. Let's go back down, something a bit more saturated, and let's go more of a red, like a reddish red, and just kind of darken that up a little bit. Let's go really dark. Get a little bit more variation in there. There we go. Not a lot of contrast going on, so we'll drop a few real dark spots in there to kind of help with that. Then you can always come in here, change the roughness. So maybe we want to make it in some spots a little bit shinier. You could come in here and break things up a little bit. If it's a little bit too much, kind of too uniformly shiny, you can kind of go a little bit rougher and darken it back in. We can also go to the eraser. If there are areas where it doesn't blend as well back into the neck, we can come in here and kind of break things up. On the eraser, you can use different brushes with the eraser as well to kind of break it up in a little bit more of a natural way. All right, and then we can also come in here and start to blend this in, so maybe it's not as distinct. So something like that for the ears, and we can call this ears. Let's go ahead and continue with the head. In the next clip, we'll add some kind of a blush, kind of a color around the eyes and some of the other areas to make it come a little bit more alive. And then we'll add some kind of blue head bumps and look at how we can start to change some of that detail. So we'll do that next.